And welcome everyone to our weekly call, which this week, if I share my slides, unfortunately, I may well be doing a reasonable percentage of the talking, which is so I apologize in advance, but the purpose of the call this week is principally to just take a look at the IETF 117 agenda and highlight some of the more interesting working group and other sessions. So I'll talk through those that have caught my eye, and if anyone else has had a chance as yet to do the same, please, as we go through, you can interrupt me and call out other stuff that I've evidently overlooked, because there's quite a lot on the agenda. So we'll talk through that, and then time permitting, we'll sort of catch up on some of the sort of news headlines, etc., as always. So jumping right in it, a reminder that IETF 117 starts, well, technically the hackathon starts on Saturday. I haven't put the hackathon on here, but the hackathon, as always, runs over the weekend. And then in terms of the main proceedings, you'll see as we run through this, I'm going to call out some of the interesting working group sessions and some of the side meetings and a couple of other bits. There are each day apart from Wednesday and Friday, there are 4 sort of separate sessions of working groups. I think there's 8 parallel tracks throughout each day, so there's a lot of different sessions. So apologies in advance if I've missed something that's of interest to you, but as I say, if that's the case and you're aware of it, please shout it. I'll be happy to add it to an updated version of these slides, which I'll equally be happy, if it's useful, to send out after this call with links to the agendas where they're available. The other health warning, even though we're only a week away from the sort of main part of the meeting, there's still a reasonable number of working groups that have yet to publish their agendas. So no doubt they'll hopefully all appear through this week. But when I looked late this morning, early this afternoon, UK time, there was still quite a few gaps. With that in mind,
flag something.
Of course, please.
Yeah, so the hackathon, it's free to sign up, and I don't know how many people are already signed up, but I'm back in person, and I've got a team that's going to work on John Todd's encrypted DNS server redirection. And there's a number of good DNS projects. So even just going in there and chit-chatting with DNS people on the Saturday and Sunday is a good thing to do. It's a good place to catch up on what people think about the new stuff that's coming along.
No, that's an excellent tip. And if do you have a full team assembled for that particular task?
Oh no, this is very informal. So if people have an interest in that draft or want to show, we're actually trying to sort of shake out the protocol a bit. So we'll be sitting there and people can join us, and we haven't quite figured out exactly how. I think how we're going to set up a server, but I think we have a server that we'll be able to use, and we'll know more when we get there. It's always a little informal, but I think there's also a couple of other interesting DNS projects. There's usually a DNS table or 2, so I do recommend it for people if they want to kind of schmooze and code and stuff like that.
Brilliant, good, great shout. So thank you for flagging that. Anyone that's in there that's around over the weekend and so inclined, that's a great tip to at least wander in and see what people are up to, if not actually taking part, which would be even better. Now, in parallel with the hackathon on the Sunday, the Internet Engineering and Planning Group, IEPG, is meeting as it normally does on the Sunday before the IETF meeting from 10 till 12 in the Continental Room 4 in the Union Square Hilton. So I couldn't find an agenda when I was looking earlier, but it's usually more sort of practically orientated, or so operationally orientated, sorry, is the phrase I was searching for. So if you are in San Francisco at the weekend, other than going to the hackathon, that's the IEPG is another good thing to do. I can't remember last time. I presume they have remote access as well, although I'll need to look into that because I can't remember for sure if they do. But as you can see, that's Sunday morning local time. Anyone that's a new participant to the IETF sort of meeting, that means you've been to 5 or less meetings. There's a networking opportunity, quick connections between 4 and 5 on Sunday. You do need to pre-register. That's in the California room. And then from 5 through till 8 is the welcome reception. All of these are in the Hilton, I should say, so I won't keep reading out the rooms. And then, as always happens in parallel with the welcome reception, between 6 and 8, there's a hot RFC lightning talks, which you get allocated, I think it's 4 minutes, to basically attract people's interest, attention and interest to something. And it's possible that possibly I and Arno may just do something about the ECH deployment issues draft that we and others are currently working on. But there's usually a bunch of interesting stuff that comes up through those, and they're all very quick and snappy because you do only have 4 minutes roughly. So just the thing to sort of listen in on with a beer or two close at hand on the Sunday if you're on site. And then sort of moving into the meeting proper on Monday. Dispatch is always a good session to go into if you don't have a diary clash. Generally covers BOS updates and meetings of interest, so that's generally a good thing to join. But actually this time around it coincides with DNS Ops, which has got a lot of drafts on the agenda, as it often does. So I think a minimum of 2 hours worth, probably more than that, I suspect. So whether they managed to work through the entire agenda, I'm not sure. But also Mask, which I know from previous of these calls others have highlighted is definitely of interest. So Mask is also taking place during session 1 on Monday. When I looked a couple of hours ago, the agenda wasn't available yet for Mask. So whereas with the Dispatch and DNS Ops ones, if you click on those, it will take you through to the agenda. With Mask, it will just take you through to the working group, the main working group site, absent any meeting materials. And I'll keep going, by the way. If anyone wants to highlight anything about any ones I've mentioned or anything else that's taking place at the same time as I go through these, just interrupt me, raise your hand, put something in the chat, or whatever is easiest for you. Otherwise I would just plow on. Hopefully I'll remember to ask if anyone's got anything to add every so often, but don't wait to be asked if you do. Session 2 on Monday, MIMI, the More Instant Messaging Interoperability working group, has got the first of 2 meetings, and it's, if I recall, I think the first of the 2 meetings is primarily looking at one of the current drafts, and at the same time the IETF has got one of a couple of applied networking research workshops, which it's running, where it's got a panel discussion plus some research papers looking at network measurement. Session 3 on Monday, Madness working group is meeting, which again previously has had some topics of interest to this group, but currently the agenda is not available. And at the same time, again, IETF Applied Networking Research Group is meeting, and it's got research papers on DNS and BGP. the two things which are usually to blame if something is not working. So that on the face of it looks quite interesting to go along to for session 3 on Tuesday. And then session 4, the thing that caught my eye mostly was the privacy preserving measurement working group, but again, papers weren't available when I looked, just so you're aware. Rounding off Monday, there's a new participants dinner. Again, if you've been to 5 or less meetings in person, but as it says on the screen, you need to have pre-registered for that. There's probably a modest payment as well, but I think it might be $25, something like that, I think, which is taking place in the Hilton. Also, one of the side meetings caught my eye, which is the public interest technology group side meeting, which is where some of those people which have, well, from last time, I think a common interest in privacy in particular, just meets to catch up and share their thoughts on the agenda for the week and other related matters. So that's happening, as you can see, after the main sessions are finished between 6:30 and 7:30 local time in one of the 2 side meeting rooms. I think the smaller of the 2, so they're anticipating a dozen or so people going along for that. Based on last time, that might mean that a few people will need to bring chairs, because I suspect there could be a few more than that turn up, but we'll see. Okay, rolling through to Tuesday, unless anyone's got anything to add. I can't see anything in the chat, can't see any hands raised, so I'll plough on. One of the BOFs is make key transparency BOF, but there's no agenda yet, so I can't really comment on that. I think the topic's interesting, but without the agenda, it's hard to judge for sure. Then in session 2, there's actually 2 very interesting working groups, or one research group, one open meeting taking place, which is the Decentralized Internet Infrastructure Research Group is meeting and has got several interesting presentations pretty much back to back. I'll put them on the slide, but yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting content there, while simultaneously in the IAB open meeting, amongst other things, there's partitioning as an architecture for privacy is one of the presentations, and another presentation is a report from the IAB workshop on management techniques in encrypted networks, the M10 workshop, which I think was last August, September time, I think, about 8-9 months ago roughly. So it's a report back from that. So I think both of those are very interesting sessions. It's a shame that they clash, but there you are. Session 3 on Tuesday. The only thing so far that's caught my eye was the General Area Dispatch, DOSPatch. Well, I'll correct the typo before I send the slides out. Dispatch group, which yeah, there'll be a number of presentations put forward for asking for a steer on where they should be dispatched to. So that's always a sort of useful thing just to sit in on if you have the time. And then session 4, security dispatch does the same thing, but for security specific topics, but that coincides with the ADD, Adaptive DNS Discovery working group, which has got a number of things being updated, as well as some new topics. There's a Split Horizon paper being updated, a Resolver Info update, as well as delegated credentials to host encrypted DNS forwarders on CPE paper as well. So plenty of good material in the ADD session this time round. So definitely that's one I think it'd be worth going along to or dialing into, depending whether you're on site or there in person. I should have also mentioned we may do an ECH side meeting on Tuesday morning for half an hour, but we'll only do that if we don't end up with agenda time during the the ops group on Thursday afternoon. The agenda for that hadn't been finalised when I checked earlier today. So if we end up with agenda time in the working group, then we'll withdraw the side meeting. So that's only there conditionally, but hopefully we'll knock that out. So should know that in the next day or so, as soon as the OPSEC agenda is available. And then also in the evening on Tuesday, so it's back to Tuesday evening. This time around it was Thursday in Yokohama, but it's back to its more traditional Tuesday evening slot, is the IETF First Social, which is at the San Francisco Museum of the Moving Arts. You do need a ticket. I think they tried to increase the number of tickets this time around. So, but inevitably there'll be the last minute request for whether anyone has a spare ticket. So if you do want to go to that, it's worth trying to actually secure a ticket now if you wish to. Again, there's a fee involved. I think it's about $25 when I bought mine the other week. So you can book it through the sort of registration process. So it's definitely worth doing that if you haven't done so already. Should be a good evening. Again, I'm not seeing anything in the chat or any hands raised. So if I haven't missed anything major on Tuesday, I'll carry on to Wednesday. At which point the Mimi group is meeting for a second time with some new content. Apologies, I forgot to put what the titles were, but so it doesn't overlap directly with the agenda for the session on Monday. So they are looking for two lots of time this time around, unusually, for Mimi. Again, I'll have a look before I send the slides out and add a bit of a pointer as to what they're looking to cover, because the agenda is available for that. Then on for session 2, the Human Rights Protocol Considerations Research Group is meeting, covering some pretty interesting stuff on digital authoritarianism, internet fragmentation. And also there's an internet draft, reflections on 10 years past the Snowden revelations. So I think all three of those, certainly from a policy point of view, definitely well worth sitting in on. All very interesting topics. That happens to clash with the TLS working group, which when I looked again a couple of hours ago, the agenda wasn't available. I think one of the co-chairs is on, but who may or may not know what's planned for the agenda. If you want to sort of shout out, Chris, otherwise no doubt it will be available imminently on the ITF agenda site.
Yeah, we plan to post it sometime this week.
Yeah, fair enough. Nothing caught my eye in session 3 for Wednesday. So I'll pause just for a moment in case there's anything really interesting that anyone had spotted.
Hello.
Peter, did you have something?
Hi there. Hello.
Yep. Hi, Peter. Did you want to add something, Peter?
Who's this?
Peter's on the phone. I will mute him.
I think he's got a phone call.
Okay.
Oh. Sorry, Brett, I didn't mean to mute you, but yeah, I think you're right. So I just muted him. I will press on. Right. Yeah. So if nothing's caught anyone's eye so far, if there's anything post this call that you think I've overlooked for session 3, do please drop me a line and let me know, and I'll update the slides accordingly. And that applies, by the way, to any of the other sessions. If there's anything major you think should be added to this that I've missed. And then session 4 on Wednesday, as always, is the ITF plenary, as is traditional for the session 4 on the Wednesday of every ITF, which will cover all the normal stuff, I'm sure. Moving on to Thursday, again, nothing immediately caught my eye for session 1. Session 2 was the IETF open meeting, which has got, amongst other things, some research methodologies from IETF data presentation. Session 3 is the OPSEC working group, where I'm hoping to have an agenda to give an update on our ECH deployment considerations draft, which is currently in version 06, I think, and may well be at version 07 by the time we get to the session on Thursday. In the unlikely event you're not drawn to OPSEC, there's also the security area open meeting, but again, when I looked at that, there weren't any, there wasn't an agenda available for it earlier today. Nothing caught my attention on for session 4 when I had a look. So jumping ahead to Friday. Yes, sorry, yeah, just seeing in the chat. Yeah, I agree. Certainly is, Vicky. On Friday, there's an EODIA side meeting between 8:30 and 9:30. That's the Education and Outreach Directorate, which I certainly plan to go along to, particularly because of the outreach aspects of that. Because I definitely think that's something that we as an IETF community could do a lot better at. If we're ever going to improve the overall diversity of the community, which is why I put time into it. And then on the agenda proper, unfortunately, 2 of the research groups are overlapping, which I think is really disappointing and would have been easily avoidable, but never mind. So session 1, you've got PEARG, the Privacy Enhancement and Assessments Research Group, which is looking at privacy in large language models very topically, as well as some open source tests of web browser privacy. And I think both of those are really good topics for the IETF to be covering. And at the same time, in the Measurement and Analysis for Protocols research group, MAPRG, you've got web privacy by design. And as you can see, cross-layer interactions of quick DNS and HTTP3, exploring the cookieverse. So I think incredibly interesting content across both of those, and it's really disappointing that they happen to be clashing. No idea why, but there you are. And then rounding off the week for me, OHI, the Oblivious HTTP Applications Intermediation Working Group, meets in the sort of session 2. That's the end of the formal agenda for the week, where it's looking at the Oblivious HTTP draft, as well as looking at discovery of Oblivious services. I think I said this last time around. I think it's really good that OHI is now considering discovery, because originally I think some of the active participants in the group were adamant discovery wasn't necessary. So I'm really pleased that that's being changed, and that is now part of the agenda for the working group. And that's everything I had from the 117 agenda. Again, just a chance. You may not have had a chance yourselves to look at it yet, but is there anything that anyone thinks I've missed that looks really interesting, or anything that you want to add to in terms of detail to anything that I've sort of scampered through in the last 20 minutes or so? And if there is, just unmute or pop something in the chat, whichever is easier. Apart from Peter, obviously, who's having far more interesting phone calls by the look of it, and staying on.
I'll mention there's a newish working group. It's not that new, called Tigris, which is about secure sharing of digital credentials. That I think this is on session 4 on Thursday. That looks interesting and may have some techniques that will be valuable to our community. So you might want to people might want to take a look. Tigris, it's a very belabored acronym.
Yes, in the finest IETF traditions, as I recall, Alison. Yes, somewhat contrived, but yeah, that's a good shout. I missed that when I was looking through the agenda. I will add that, and I think there may have been at least one BOF other than the one I've included, which I may have overlooked. So I will go back through the agenda again, so I'll add Tigris and I'll see if there's anything else obvious that I overlooked. But as I say, if anyone, if something snagged your attention and you think it should be of interest to others, just drop me a line, and I'll add that. I'll probably send out the link to the recording and the slides by about Wednesday, so feel free to message me before then if there is anything that you think be useful to include on the agenda. Okay, well, let me completely change tack there to some of the weekly headlines. As always, I just sort of point to a small number of these. You should have got these from the weekly headlines mailing list. If you don't get that, by the way, if anyone doesn't and wants to, just ping me an email directly, and I'll add you to the mailing list for that. That said, the one at the top of the list, since it came up on this call a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the well, I think it was Ethereum naming service in particular, but you can see the DNS Research Federation have done some more work looking at potential implications of blockchain naming. So there's more material there. And I had a conversation with Emily last week, and we're exploring whether it might be useful to run perhaps an in-person discussion, because there's probably quite a lot of meat in this subject matter, to look at the implications for, if you like, the DNS from blockchain naming, as well as looking at maybe some of the positive aspects of ENS or other variants, because some of the main sort of corporate brands seem to be quite interested in blockchain naming, so it'd be good to explore that and understand why. But they do seem to be somewhat ahead of the curve compared to some other sort of standard related developments, and of course the downside is it might potentially fragment the naming system, which has got some fairly obvious downsides. So we're thinking maybe in the autumn whether there's scope to do an in-person maybe half-day session, and which we can obviously record, provide sort of remote access to as well, but more on that in due course. And then sort of separately, Jeff Huston, we all know from APNIC, has done a really interesting paper looking at NX domain responses. As you would expect from Jeff, it's very data rich and well worth your time to read, albeit it's not a short paper, but definitely worth a look if you're able. Let's see. Since Brett's on the call, it's his former employer. I should mention an interesting article, well, a very short one from Nominet. Just it's the 6th year of their operation of a protective DNS service. So a couple of thoughts on that. And then the one at the bottom, you'll be aware that the ICANN DNS Symposium is now all confirmed. The venue is known. It's a sort of resort hotel in Da Nang in Vietnam, and if you go to the link that I've put on the bottom of the slide there, it's got the details of all 3 events. So there's a DNS abuse event, the ICANN DNS Symposium, and then the OARC 41 meeting, all in the same venue, running through from Monday through Thursday. You need to register, but there's no registration fee to attend remotely. Obviously you've got travel and hotel costs if you attend in person, but that should be a really good 4 days. Just over the page, right up from the RIPE DNS themed hackathon from a short while ago, so that's worth a look. not sure there's anything else. I mentioned one of the papers being covered. I think HRPC research group is looking at 10 years since Snowden. That's based on the internet draft that's covered in the AP Nick blog post that is on the fourth bullet point down on this page. Or third bullet point down, there's a new book on DNS in security by Joss Keogh and Ross Gibson, both of whom are often on this call. Although ironically neither of them are today, but yeah, you may have an interest in looking out for that. Yeah, and then some other stuff interesting. In the interest of time, I won't go through all this, but other things that caught my eye as well. But you can take a look at those at your leisure. In terms of calls for papers, the ICANN DNS Symposium has got a deadline of 14th of August for any proposals for papers, or one paragraph outlined to the email on the slide. And then at the end of the month, there's a call for papers from the DNS Research Federation, but that's for potential funding. So that will be, I think, principally of appeal to researchers and others, where there might be funding available to help on to actually sort of deliver on the writing and associated work of any proposals. And then RIPE 87 has just put out a call for proposals with a deadline in the middle of September, so there's sort of plenty of time for that just yet. And that UK and off for the end of September, for loads of time for any proposals for that. It's not too late to register for IETF 117 to attend either remotely or in person. So if you've forgotten to register, you can still do so. When I looked yesterday, I think there were about 1,400 people down to attend, 800-ish, just over 800 in person at that point, about 400 or so remotely. That compares to in Yokohama, it was about 1,000 in person and about 600 remotely, so it may well tick up a bit still from there. Without going on about it, the ICANN DNS Symposium and associated events, if you are thinking of going to that in person, you may well need a visa from the Vietnamese government, so do allow yourself plenty of time to put in your visa application if that's on your sort of list of interest. Yeah. A reminder that we don't have a call next week because it will be just about coinciding with the start of the IETF meeting, but we will pick up the following Monday just to look at any of the highlights coming out of that meeting, plus anything else that's topical at that time. And then you can see we've got other stuff scheduled through now to potentially mid-September, although I've moved something to the latter part of that list, so we've got a gap at the moment on the 14th of August potentially. So if there's stuff that you'd like to cover, have an interest in doing it, then do let me know, and we can potentially do it then. That's it from me. I can see from the chat as I stop sharing that the UK NOF deadline may well be the 2nd of September. When I last looked at Marek, because you've helpfully sort of flagged that, it did coincide with the start of the meeting because the programme committee were trying to be flexible to accept anything right up to the last minute potentially, but it could have changed. So I will double check to see if that's since changed and update it if it is now the 2nd of September rather than 27th. Peter, if you dare unmute, I'm not sure what your bottom comment, how that links to. I see. You got a.
No, the bottom comment was about my proctologist calling. I just came across this article from Cloudflare. Somebody pointed out that it was affecting .NET and .com resolutions in APAC.
Okay. Oh, okay. Thank you. Useful to know. So yeah, the link's in the chat for anyone that's interested in that Cloudflare article, blog post from Cloudflare on some connection errors in Asia Pac, possibly affecting .com and .net. Okay. Well, that neatly segues into any other business. So does anyone have anything else that you would like to highlight, as Peter just did, or just talk about generally? Let me stop talking and see if you do. If you do, put it in the chat, raise your virtual hand, or just unmute and start talking if nobody else is, whichever is easiest for you. We'll give it a minute or so to see if anyone does. Okay, see, if you're not looking at the chat, Patrick has pointed out that there's an explanation from VeriSign on what happened, and there's a link to VeriSign's explanation at the end of the Cloudflare article. So thank you for that. That's good to know. Anyone that is planning to go in person to the IETF meeting, by the way, I should have said that at the start. I'm planning to land in San Francisco on Friday evening and be there to the following Friday evening. So if anyone is there in person at all and wants to meet up at any point for coffee, beer, or whatever, then do let me know. Be good to do that in person for a change. Right, last call for anyone with any other business. Not seeing anything. So, okay, well, if anyone does spy anything that you think you want to add to the sort of list of interesting stuff for the IETF agenda, ping me the details. I'll add it on there before I send out the slides. Otherwise, hope that was useful. Have a fantastic week, and hopefully see you either in person or maybe online through Meet Echo at the IETF meeting this time next week. So see you then, and have a great week, everyone. See you next week. Bye all.